welcome again to Marketing Munchies, the podcast that will satisfy your marketing appetite in less than 30 minutes. Today we're back with Matt. Hi Matt, how are you today?
I'm good, LJ. Great to be back.
Thank you. So today we're going to talk about repurposing your content and how it will help your business save time. And who better than to ask our amazing copywriter and content creator, Matt. So can you tell us a little bit more about what do you mean by repurposing content and how does it really help businesses?
Yeah, so I guess this conversation is all about helping business owners who are probably trying to do a bit of their own marketing, save a bit of time, or get the most bang for their buck out of the investment that they do make in content. So repurposing content is really just about taking the big core pieces of content that you're producing for your business and then breaking them up into either smaller pieces, reformatting them into different types of content. So that could be an example of like the podcast that we do together, turning those long form videos, which go from 20 to 30 minutes into shorter, 30-second to 90-second sort of verticals that then you can use on Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, and all those platforms that are really sort of hot right now. It might be taking some of the ideas that are discussed in that long form piece of video and then creating some blog or written content on the back of that. And it might be then making that even shorter into some simple and easy social media posts that have accompanying graphics and link to the longer form of content. So it's about making sure that when you do invest that time or that money into like a pillar piece of content, something that's really meaty, substantial, has a lot of value in it, that you're getting the biggest bang for your buck from that. So you're really able to share that content across a wide number of platforms. And that's something that we try and help all of our clients with at Content Hype, in terms of making sure that if they do invest in some content with us, or if they've used a videographer for some content, that they're then getting the most value out of that content. It's just not just one video that got posted once. It's 6 reels. It might be articles that are written based on the transcripts of those videos or the ideas that are discussed in those videos, and just making sure that when you do make that investment, whether that's of time or of money or of both, that you're getting the most mileage out of that content.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes total sense as well, because as you said, it's exactly what we're doing with those podcasts. So it's not just where we post them as MP3 on the podcast channels, but we also have a YouTube channel, Reels and TikToks. And I've noticed as well that when you have different segments of the one video or one article, that's where you can play around with it a little bit. And I've always felt, not just from someone in the digital marketing space, but also from a user that consumes a lot of social media, sometimes you really need to see 1, 2, 3, even 10 videos of one person to actually build that trust and relate to what they're saying. So, you're able to know what they talk about. Are they really the experts, or are they just saying anything so they can get the views and the conversions, really?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, and I think the other thing when it comes to repurposing content is to try and make sure that when you're cutting up or using bits and pieces of the longer form of content, just think about the channels that you're going to use that shorter content on. TikTok, a lot of people are on there more for entertainment value, so you might try and take the funnier part of a clip, from a longer form of content. If you're looking to create something for your website, like a blog, you're really going to look at the more informational aspect, or the things that demonstrate authority, all the things that the search engines like to see, to make sure that that's got the best chance of being seen by the people that need to see it. And then LinkedIn is obviously its own beast in terms of the sort of content that you might push there. So again, really sort of informational, educational, really value-led sort of content. So it's always good to keep in mind, I guess, where are these shorter pieces of content going, and how can you use those pieces of content to get in front of the right people at the right time. Because like you say, people sometimes need to see you 5 to 10 times before they hit the follow button.
Correct.
Or before they go and look at the long form piece, for example, this podcast. They might need to see 6 of our reels before they think, oh, well, maybe this is worth me listening to the full thing. It's very rare nowadays that you get people jumping straight onto the long form product or content they normally like to see they find you via the short,
Yeah.
sharp pieces, decide, yep, this is something I'd like to listen to more of or watch more of or read more of.
Yeah.
And then they'll go and find you on those appropriate channels. Obviously, you need to make sure that that's easy to find too.
Yeah, it's more like a trailer, really. Just when you watch a movie, you're like, okay, I'm just going to see the trailer first. If I like it, I'm just going to go and invest that amount of time into it. And I guess the other thing that I'm thinking of at the moment is you don't have to limit yourself to one channel or one platform, because as you might have heard, in America, they are trying to ban TikTok. And it's not just America, it's all over the world. So all those influencers and creators, content creators, they are worried because they've built that empire on one platform. And then in a click of a button, in America, for example, 150 million users are actually on TikTok, and in a click of a button, you lost that exposure.
Yeah.
So it's very important and smart for any business to actually be visible and available on all different platforms, just to make sure, because we don't control this space.
No. Yeah.
And, in a click of a button or a decision made by older congressmen and women, you suddenly, lose all that hard work that you've done.
Yeah.
And I guess that when you said the long format, that is 100% correct, because the way that I see it from a business owner and also from a digital marketing expert is your website is your main home. That's your property. That's what you own. That's what you control more of anything else. So make sure that that content is actually on your website, whether it's written, whether it's a video, whether it's a podcast. Because to be honest, if everything else falls apart, that's your safe place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's your home on the internet, really, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the other day I was talking to a client who lost access to her Facebook account, and now she's thinking about writing blogs and adding those blogs into her website because she lost all the access to the social media platforms.
Yeah.
But imagine if she did what you're saying, where she repurposed that, the main thing is on the website, and then just she advertised that on her social platforms. At least there would be damage, but it wouldn't be that damaging.
You could still be found, you still have a place where your content's living, and, you're not, I guess, as much at the mercy of not just the decision makers who decide what platforms we can and can't use, but the decisions of the platform owners themselves, What worked on Instagram 6 months ago is very different to what will work now. It's very important to be agile. When a new feature is released or a new type of media is released on these platforms, they are going to reward the users that adopt them early. They're going to give them more reach, more organic sort of views. So it's important to be ready to jump on those trends. I guess it's just something that I think every business owner should have that skill, or have the skill within their team or in their external resources, is that ability to take the core pieces of content and then be able to quickly, re-edit them or reuse them for different means and different platforms.
Yeah, 100%. And then I guess the other question is, how would you know which piece of content is going to work with you? Like, how, as a content creator, how would you know the tone of voice, what to create, what to write about?
Yeah.
What tells you?
Yeah, I think I always look for the big pillar pieces of content. Like if I'm working with a new client and they don't have those big pillar pieces of content, so that might be like a particularly long blog post on an area of their expertise where they can really stand out from the crowd. I'd start with something like that, and then look at, well, how could this be then turned into some video scripts, and can we get a videographer in to come and create some great sort of, some video content around those key ideas. It might be that, the client's been on things like they might not have their own podcast, but they've been guests on other podcasts. And you look at how you can take that content, whether it's the transcripts, and turn those into articles or into shorter videos that you can use. They're the sort of things that I look for. I look for the pieces of content that are a bit longer, whether that's in terms of word count or whether that's in terms of length of time, and then look at how can we repurpose that into shorter sort of bite-sized pieces of content. There's a wealth of tools out there now that make that job a lot easier too for those that have a bit of time to do it themselves. For these podcasts, normally I use something called Descript. So you upload your long form piece of video content. It transcribes the whole thing for you, and you can basically just make cuts from within the text editor and have, resize the video so that it goes from YouTube format to like more of your reels or shorts.
That's the one you were showing me yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Oh
yeah.
my God, that was really
So
wicked.
you can take that 30-minute piece of content and then clip that into, 10-minute long pieces relatively quickly now. If you're more advanced, you might be familiar with like the Adobe Creative Cloud suites, like, apps like Premiere Pro, that makes it relatively easy to cut up content as well.
Yeah.
But then in terms of, even like we discussed back in episode 1, some of the AI tools out there like ChatGPT, you can plug your well-written piece of content into a ChatGPT and ask it to summarize the key points, and then you can use those to make social posts. So there's a lot of different ways now that you can, slice the pie, I guess, when it comes to repurposing your content.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think from a digital marketing point of view as well, if you understand where your audience spend their time, and you might be a business that has different types of audiences, and you probably market to a vast majority of people, so it can be different age groups, for example, different genders, and you know how it is different, so you can repurpose that same content. You don't have to create something else, but let's say you're targeting women aged 35 plus, then you know that you're going to put that on Instagram, versus, for example, if you're targeting the younger generation, that's where you go to platforms like TikTok, for example. And then, as you said, if you know that your content is more educational, probably you'll go to YouTube or even TikTok these days, to be honest. So yeah, it's really smart. And even from a business point of view, I definitely see the value in it, and particularly when, particularly content, you don't see the return on investment right away. It's a long-term strategy for you to show you have the authority, you have your knowledge, and as we spoke in previous episodes as well about the EAT, which is your experience and expertise. So even that you can use on Google. So people don't see the return on investment right away. And it's hard to evaluate and show the value of that content. So saving also that cost by dividing it into different platforms and seeing that engagement on different platforms would probably as well make more sense for business owners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think we might have had some questions come in on this topic.
Yes, we did. So I guess one of the questions, and it's an important question to be honest, is what are the common mistakes to avoid when you are repurposing your content?
Yeah. I think one thing I don't like seeing is this rise of like a super obvious AI voiceovers. Like I know it's really like an easy quick fix to having a proper voiceover or just recording the voiceover yourself. But that's one thing I don't like. I think it's really obvious when you see it.
Yeah.
And I find it very hard to connect with that obviously AI voice as opposed to a human voice, even if that human voice was recorded in relatively poor condition, like, not on a studio mic or something, just in the phone.
Yeah.
I feel like I'd have a better chance of connecting with that. I think the other mistake can be where the tone isn't consistent. So you might have taken like a video piece and tried to write a blog or article about that piece, and the information isn't really syncing up, or the tone of voice isn't the same. You really want to try and keep whatever your sort of brand voice is, you want to try and make sure that's consistent, no matter how you're repurposing the content. Now, obviously, if you're just simply cutting longer video pieces into shorter video pieces, that's probably a bit easier to achieve. But it's when you're transferring that from a real visual, piece where you can see and hear everything to maybe like a written piece, that's where sometimes that can sort of fall over.
Yeah, well, these are really important measures. I guess the other question that I would love to ask you that question as well. How often should you repurpose the content?
It really depends on what the topic of the content is, what the discussion's about. Like, so if we're doing, as an example on this podcast, if we were doing a podcast episode on a really topical, in the moment sort of topic, so episode 1 we talked about AI, right? ChatGPT. Now that is moving so quickly that what we spoke about, a couple of weeks ago might not be relevant in 6 months. So that sort of content you really need to get maximum value out of while it's current and relevant. But then this might be a good example of something that's a bit more evergreen. This is always sort of a relevant discussion. The tools, the where we spoke about the different tools we use, that might not be a section that I use in 6 months or 12 months, but the overarching, I guess, message here is relatively evergreen. The main points around what sort of content can you repurpose, all that sort of stuff. So you could reuse that every couple of months if you wanted to keep hammering home that point. I guess the things that you want to continually keep in your schedule of your content schedule are the things that relate most closely to your value proposition. So the things that clients need to know about you to make a choice about whether to use your products or services, they're the things that you should be using as often as you can in as many different types of spaces as you can. And then the more topical elements of what you're talking about or writing about, you can use those, relatively in a shorter time frame.
And I guess we have time for one last question. And it is, how would you know which content to actually repurpose?
Yeah. So again, this is going to be your real longer form pillar content, or the content that, as I alluded to before, is super tied into your value proposition, the content that's going to be able to help you illustrate to your target audience why you're the best choice for whatever needs they have that relate to your services. So how are you going to solve their pain points? How are you going to make their life easier? How are you going to help them achieve a hope and dream? How are you going to help them avoid a fear? All that sort of stuff. That's the sort of things that you want to make sure you're repurposing.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. That was really enlightening. And even for me, I'm like reconsidering all the things that I'm posting, thinking about how can I reuse them again in the future.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. And we will see you on our next episode.